You really had that record quarter, handily beating Wall Street consensus. What drove the gains?
Thank you for having me on. So a combination of sustained strength in volume of sales, a very rapidly growing fintech business with increasing revenues and profits coming in from credit, and a new profit engine for us, which is our advertising business, that despite being still small in terms of its future potential, is a very high margin revenue stream that's growing very nicely.
MercadoLibre is looking to increase investments in Latin America this year, right? Does that mean that it will be larger than the $10 billion for last year? And how much of that will go to Brazil?
So Brazil is our largest market. It represents over 55% of our overal revenues. And so investments tend to come in line with that proportion, more than half of our investments. We certainly see significant potential, both in e-commerce and fintech in the region going forward, and we continue to invest aggressively behind those opportunities. So absolutely, we expect our investments in 23 to surpass those in 22. And as a consequence of that, we expect to continue to see the kind of high growth that we've been seeing so far. If you look at our 22 results, we grew north of 50% revenues on an FX neutral basis while expanding margins. And I like to say that we did 110-1, which was $100 billion of payment processed, $10 billion of revenue, and $1 billion of EBIT in 22.
The reason that I'm focusing on Brazil, of course, is because of Americanas filing for bankruptcy. How has that event impacted your company?
So our strategy remains unchanged. Our strategy is not impacted by what's happening to competitors, but obviously at a tactical level, when there's potential change in market structure, there will be market share to be gained. I think tactically we are looking at distinct opportunities to lean into that, whether it's reaccelerating our first-party business, trying to understand product categories where they were strong, and how can we offer to the consumers that potentially will not be buying there, will be buying less there, the ability to buy on MercadoLibre and hopefully gain that share.
Pedro, we've seen an outsized impact when it comes to tech companies globally with a lot of downsizing and layoffs. Is that something that you envision for the company?
So we feel we're in a bit of an island right now. We were efficient and we were cautious throughout the pandemic. I think we invested accordingly. And so we don't find ourselves right now with overstaffing or overcapacity in terms of most of our logistics operations. And so there have been no layoffs at Meli. I think we've signaled that we will continue to grow our engineering base. We think it's a competitive advantage in an area where maybe we can accelerate a little bit while others are actually pulling back. So we will continue to hire, obviously at a more cautious pace. And that's even more so when we look at non-engineering headcount in terms of staff or businesses. But we do have the fortune, I think, of not having found ourselves with excess headcount or investments in areas. And so we haven't been pulling back, which is a bit counter-currency to what we see in most of tech land right now.
Let me ask you about the SPAC. I think the last time we spoke to you, you said you'd narrowed the list to about 30. Has that been narrowed further?
Sorry, we had narrowed the targets on?
I think the last time we spoke to you, you said you'd narrowed the list of targets for the SPAC to about 30 LATAM tech firms. I'm wondering if that's gotten smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. So it has, and I think as the clock ticks on this, we're down to a few interesting targets. Not much I can comment there. But at the end of the day, I think this is part of a larger corporate development portfolio. If we find something that makes sense, as some of the conversations we're engaged in we're enthused about, then fantastic. And otherwise, I think at the end of the day, we need to be good custodians of our investors' funds. And if nothing comes up, then there's always the chance to return the money.